The sound of the keys hitting the marble countertop echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Elena Brooks didn't flinch. She simply continued stirring her tea, watching the steam curl upward as if nothing had happened at all. Over the past 6 months, she had learned that reacting only fed his ego. Silence, on the other hand, unsettled him. Victor Brooks, her husband of 7 years, soon to be her ex, stood near the doorway in an expensive charcoal suit, adjusting his cufflinks in the dark reflection of the turned-off television. That suit had been her idea. She remembered standing beside him in the boutique, convincing him it made him look powerful. Now it just looked borrowed. "Tomorrow," Victor said smugly, not turning around, "this whole circus ends." Elena lifted her cup and took a slow sip. The tea had gone cold, but she didn't mind. "I hope you've packed your things," he continued. "I'm not waiting after court for you to drag your junk around. The condo stays with me, we've already discussed that." Elena finally looked up. "We didn't discuss anything," she said calmly. "You talked, I listened." Victor laughed, that familiar laugh she once mistook for confidence. Now it sounded hollow. "Don't play dumb, Elena," he said, turning to face her. "I've got the best divorce attorney in the city." "You've got what, some retired charity lawyer? I paid for everything. You stayed home playing the supportive wife, the court will leave you with nothing." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I even offered you a settlement, you refused, big mistake." Elena said nothing. Victor mistook her silence for fear. "My car's waiting," he added, grabbing his coat. "Lydia's already downstairs, we're celebrating early. Oh, and clear out the walk-in closet, she'll need the space." The door slammed. The apartment fell into a thick, suffocating quiet. Elena slowly set her cup down and looked around the kitchen, the walls she had painted herself, the shelves she had installed, the table where they once talked about children and future vacations. Victor truly believed he knew her. To him, she was quiet, predictable, harmless. He forgot one thing. Elena was an accountant, and accountants never forget. 3 months earlier, her life had cracked open on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She had been preparing to take Victor's favorite suit to the dry cleaners. As always, she checked the pockets, a habit formed from years of rescuing lost flash drives and business cards. That day, her fingers brushed against a folded receipt. A luxury jewelry store, downtown. Total amount, $4,980. Her legs gave out and she sat down hard on the sofa. Yesterday at 2:30 p.m., Victor had texted her. "Meeting ran long, don't wait up." That same evening, a photo appeared online. A manicured hand holding champagne inside a luxury car. A gold bracelet gleamed on the wrist. The caption read, "He spoils me." Elena didn't cry, she didn't scream, she opened her laptop. While other women broke down, Elena built spreadsheets. She did confront Victor, she didn't accuse him, instead she watched, listened, calculated, every transfer, every expense, every lie. By the time Victor announced the divorce, he believed she was defeated, quiet, cornered, helpless. He had no idea she had already balanced the books. And tomorrow, in court, the numbers would speak. Victor believed tomorrow would crown him the winner. What he didn't know was that Elena had already turned his life into a case file, and the verdict was waiting. Elena Brooks learned very quickly that silence could be a disguise. By day, she was the same woman Victor expected her to be, polite, accommodating, slightly withdrawn. She asked how his meetings went. She nodded at vague explanations. She cooked dinner, folded laundry, and kept the apartment immaculate. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. By night, she became someone else entirely. Her secret office was the narrow storage room beside the laundry area. Victor had always mocked it, calling it the broom closet. He never imagined it would become the place where his future unraveled. Elena set up her laptop on an old folding table, plugged in an external hard drive, and created a new folder. She named it simply, Reconciliation. It felt fitting. The first thing she examined was the condo. Victor loved repeating the same phrase, "I pay for this place." He said it so often that even Elena had once started to believe it. But belief had no place here, only facts. 5 years ago, when Elena's grandmother Margaret passed away, she left Elena an inheritance of $140,000. That money had gone toward the down payment on the condo. Victor had suggested transferring it to his account for convenience, promising it would make the transaction smoother. Convenience, Elena now realized, had been the first brick in his deception. She pulled bank statements from the month of the purchase. The trail was clean and undeniable. Her inheritance entered her account, the same amount transferred to Victor's. 1 hour later, the down payment was wired to the developer. She scanned every page and saved multiple copies. Next came the monthly payments. Victor's card was charged, yes, but Elena knew better than to stop there. She opened her own records. Every month, like clockwork, she had transferred the exact mortgage amount to Victor's account the day before the payment processed. Each transfer had a note she barely remembered writing. Mortgage. She hadn't done it intentionally for protection. It was simply who she was: methodical, precise, cautious. That habit would now save her. As the nights passed, Alina's spreadsheet grew, tabs multiplied, dates aligned. Patterns emerged. And then came the discrepancies. Victor's official income was solid but not extravagant. Yet his spending told a different story: boutique charges, high-end restaurants, luxury hotels, sudden cash withdrawals. The math didn't add up, so Alina went deeper. Victor had changed his banking passwords, convinced she was clueless. What he forgot was that he reused passwords everywhere. Birthdays, anniversaries, his childhood dog's name. It took her less than 10 minutes. What she found made her stomach turn. Gambling sites, offshore accounts. Thousands disappearing in single nights. Money that could have paid off the condo faster. Money she had quietly replaced with her own transfers so he wouldn't notice the gap. And Lydia, the evidence was everywhere once Alina knew where to look. Plane tickets booked on business trips. Hotel rooms with double occupancy. Boutique receipts matching Lydia's social media posts, same dresses, same handbags, same unmistakable bracelet. Alina didn't scream, she didn't throw anything. She documented everything. By the end of the first month, her folder was thick. By the second, it was explosive. Still, she said nothing. Victor mistook her calm for weakness. He grew careless. More arrogant, more reckless. That was when Alina knew she needed help, not sympathy, not comfort, but strategy. A former colleague recommended an attorney named Harold Whitman. He looks harmless, her colleague had said. Like someone's grandfather, but he doesn't lose. Their meeting took place in a modest office lined with old law books. Whitman listened without interrupting as Alina laid out her evidence. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled, not kindly but knowingly. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "is not a divorce, this is an audit." For the first time in months, Alina felt something loosen inside her chest. They planned carefully. Whitman warned her Victor would provoke her, humiliate her, bring Lydia to court. "You must not react," he said. "Let him believe you're defenseless, the shock will do the rest." Alina nodded. She had already learned patience. The night before the hearing, Victor strutted through the apartment like a conqueror. He talked about vacations, renovations, new furniture. Alina listened. She checked her folder one last time. Everything was ready. Victor believed Alina had nothing. What he didn't realize was that every lie he told had already been recorded, and tomorrow the ledger would be opened in court. The morning of the hearing arrived wrapped in gray clouds and fine rain. Alina Brooks woke before her alarm. There was no panic, no shaking hands, no tightness in her chest. The fear had burned itself out weeks ago, replaced by something colder and far more stable. Clarity. She showered, dressed, and studied her reflection in the mirror. No black, no morning colors. She chose a deep navy dress, structured, professional, confident. Her hair was pulled into a neat low bun. Minimal makeup. Nothing that suggested fragility. Today, she would not look like a woman being discarded. She would look like someone who knew the ending. The courthouse buzzed with low voices and nervous energy. Alina arrived early as always. Harold Whitman stood near the courtroom doors, calm and immovable as if he had been part of the building for decades. "Remember," he said quietly, "say nothing unless I signal." Alina nodded. Victor arrived 10 minutes later. He looked immaculate, tailored suit, polished shoes, smug expression fully intact. On his arm clung Lydia Moore, dressed far too boldly for a courthouse. Her smile was sharp, deliberate, and aimed straight at Alina. Victor spotted her and immediately broke into a grin. "Well," he said loudly, making sure others could hear, "look who showed up." He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sting. "Last chance, Alina, you can still walk away with nothing quietly." Lydia laughed softly, lifting her wrist just enough for the gold bracelet to catch the light. Alina didn't respond. That unsettled him. Inside the courtroom, Victor's lawyer launched into his performance with theatrical confidence. He painted Victor as the sole provider, Alina as an idle spouse living off his success. He demanded the condo, the savings, nearly everything. Victor leaned back, satisfied. When the judge turned to the defense, Whitman stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "we dispute every claim made by the plaintiff." Victor smirked. Whitman opened the folder. "The condo," he continued, "was purchased using my client's inheritance. Here are the bank statements tracing the funds directly." The judge examined the documents. Victor's smirk faltered. Whitman didn't pause. "Furthermore, while mortgage payments were charged to Mr. Brooks' account, the funds originated from my client, every month, for 3 years." Papers slid across the bench. Victor straightened in his chair. This is nonsense, his lawyer protested. Selective paperwork. Coincidence. Whitman smiled thinly. Coincidences don't repeat with perfect accuracy for 36 consecutive months. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Victor's confidence cracked for the first time, but Whitman wasn't finished. Now let's address the dissipation of marital assets. Alina kept her gaze forward steady. Whitman began listing transactions: gambling sites, hotels, jewelry purchases, flights. Lydia shifted uncomfortably. Victor's lawyer objected, flustered. Your Honor, this is character assassination. This, Whitman interrupted calmly, is financial evidence. The judge raised her hand. Proceed. By the time Whitman mentioned the offshore accounts, Victor's face had drained of color. Sweat darkened his collar. When the judge called a short recess, Victor staggered into the hallway, rounding on Alina. What the hell did you do? He hissed. You're trying to ruin me. Alina met his eyes for the first time that day. No, Victor, she said softly. I'm just telling the truth. The courtroom doors reopened. Victor returned to his seat, but the man who walked back inside was no longer certain of victory. Victor thought the worst was over, but the court had only seen the surface. What came next would cost him far more than the condo. The courtroom felt smaller when everyone returned from recess. The air was heavier, thick with tension and quiet curiosity. Even the judge seemed more alert now, her pen poised, her gaze sharper. This was no longer a routine divorce. Something deeper had surfaced. Victor sat stiffly in his chair, jaw clenched. The confidence he'd worn so effortlessly that morning had cracked, replaced by restless movements and darting glances. Lydia was no longer smiling. She sat 2 rows back, arms crossed, her leg bouncing nervously. Harold Whitman rose again. Your Honor, he said, voice steady, we've established that the marital home was paid for almost entirely with my client's separate funds. Now we must address where the plaintiff's income actually went. Victor's lawyer stood abruptly. Objection, this is irrelevant to property division. The judge didn't even look up. Overruled, dissipation of marital assets is directly relevant. Continue, Whitman nodded. For the last 2 years, he said, Mr. Brooks claims to have supported the household. However, bank records show a different reality. He handed over another set of documents. Regular transfers to offshore betting platforms. Thousands at a time. The total amount lost through gambling alone exceeds $95,000. A ripple of disbelief passed through the benches. Victor shook his head violently. That's a lie, I don't gamble. Whitman didn't react. These are direct transaction records from his accounts. Dates, times, confirmation numbers. Most transfers occurred immediately after paydays or bonus deposits. The judge's eyes lifted slowly to Victor. Brooks, she said coolly, you will have a chance to respond. Sit down. Victor dropped back into his chair, breathing hard. Whitman continued, his voice calm, relentless. Next, expenses related to a third party. Lydia stiffened. Luxury hotels, boutique purchases, airline tickets booked under the name Lydia Moore, all paid with marital funds. Victor's lawyer objected again, weaker this time. This is speculation. Whitman raised a single receipt. A gold bracelet purchased 3 months ago. The same bracelet photographed on Ms. Moore's wrist and posted publicly with the caption, He spoils me. The judge examined the image, then looked at Lydia. Lydia looked away. Victor stood up abruptly. This is harassment. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Sit down. Victor obeyed, face flushed, hands trembling. Whitman wasn't finished. One final matter, Your Honor, income. He paused. Alina felt her pulse quicken. This was the part she'd struggled with most, not because it was weak, but because it was devastating. My client discovered that Mr. Brooks' actual income exceeded his reported earnings. Through falsified invoices and intermediary accounts, funds were diverted and disguised as reimbursements or personal loans. Victor's lawyer went pale. That is a serious accusation. It's also documented, Whitman replied. The courtroom went silent. Whitman placed the final stack of documents on the bench. We are not asking this court to pursue criminal charges. However, these facts are relevant to the credibility of the plaintiff and the source of funds he claims as his own. Victor looked like he might collapse. The judge leaned back, removed her glasses, and studied him for a long moment. Mr. Brooks, she said, do you deny these transactions? Victor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The judge sighed. The court will take a brief recess to review the evidence. As she left, Victor turned to Alina, panic breaking through. You planned this, he whispered hoarsely. You set me up. Alina gathered her papers calmly. No, she said. You did. She stood and walked away, leaving Victor staring at the realization that the life he thought he controlled was slipping through his fingers. Victor still believed he could talk his way out, but the judge was already seeing the full picture. And the verdict, once formed, could not be undone. The judge returned with measured steps, her expression unreadable. The courtroom fell silent instantly. Even the restless shuffle of feet stopped. Everyone sensed it, the moment had shifted. This was no longer a battle of arguments, it was the weighing of truth. "Please be seated," the judge said, her voice firm. Victor's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but Victor barely seemed to hear. His eyes were fixed on the bench, wide and glassy, as if staring at an approaching wave he could no longer outrun. The judge began slowly. After reviewing the submitted documentation, the court finds the following. Her words struck like controlled blows. First, the condominium in question was purchased primarily with non-marital funds originating from the defendant's inheritance. The financial tracing is clear, consistent, and properly documented. Victor swallowed hard. The court therefore recognizes the property as the separate asset of Alina Brooks. A murmur spread through the room. Victor's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor," the judge raised her hand. "Sit down, counselor." Victor's shoulders sagged. Lydia's face tightened, the sharp confidence draining from her eyes. The judge continued. "Second, regarding the dissipation of marital assets." She flipped a page. "Evidence demonstrates significant spending on gambling activities and expenditures benefiting a third party, neither of which were disclosed to nor approved by the defendant." Victor stared straight ahead, unmoving. "These expenditures," the judge said, "constitute reckless misuse of marital funds." She paused, letting the words settle. Accordingly, the court orders Mr. Brooks to reimburse the defendant half of the dissipated amount, totaling $82,500. Victor's breath hitched audibly. The judge wasn't done. "The vehicle purchased during the marriage shall remain with Mr. Brooks along with all associated debt." That single sentence sealed it. Victor's carefully constructed image provider Victor Untouchable collapsed completely. The judge concluded, "This court finds no basis for further claims by the plaintiff. Judgment is entered accordingly." The gavel struck. It was over. Victor sat frozen as the courtroom began to move around him. His lawyer leaned in, speaking rapidly, but Victor barely registered the words. Outside, the hallway buzzed. Lydia rushed up to him, irritation flashing across her face. "So," she demanded. "What did we get?" Victor looked at her blankly. "We lost," he said. "Everything," she blinked. "What do you mean everything? The condo's hers, I owe her money, the car's mine with the loan." Her expression twisted. "But the accounts, you said, there are no accounts," Victor snapped. "There's debt." Something in Lydia's eyes shifted, cold calculation replacing charm. "You told me we were set," she said slowly. "You promised." Victor opened his mouth to respond. His phone rang. He stared at the screen. "Employer." His stomach dropped. He answered. "Yes." The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Victor, we've received some concerning documentation. Internal audit flagged multiple irregularities linked to your accounts." Victor's legs weakened. "This is a misunderstanding. Pack your personal items," the voice continued. "Security will escort you out. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." The call ended. Victor lowered the phone. Lydia stared at him, disgust now openly etched across her face. "You're fired?" she asked. He nodded. She stepped back. "No," she said flatly. "I'm not doing this." She turned on her heel and walked away without looking back. Victor stood alone in the courthouse corridor, the echo of her heels fading into silence. That was when Alina passed him. She looked lighter, calmer, free. Victor reached out instinctively. "Alina," he croaked. "Please," she stopped. "You said I was nothing without you," she replied quietly. "Turns out I was everything." She walked on. Victor slid down the wall, staring at the floor. Victor believed the worst was over, but the consequences were only beginning. Outside the courthouse, life was about to deliver its final blow. Victor stayed slumped against the courthouse wall long after the hallway emptied. People passed him, lawyers, clerks, strangers carrying folders filled with their own private disasters. No one stopped. No one looked twice. For the first time in years, Victor Brooks was invisible. His phone buzzed again, a message from the bank. Account balance, insufficient funds. He laughed under his breath, a short, broken sound that startled even him. Less than 24 hours ago, he had walked into that building convinced he would walk out owning everything: home, money, power. Now he had nothing but debt and a car he couldn't afford. Outside, rain had stopped. Sunlight filtered weakly through the clouds, touching the courthouse steps. Alina stood there for a moment, breathing it in. The air smelled clean, washed free of heaviness. She hadn't realized how much weight she'd been carrying until it was gone. Harold Whitman shook her hand. You handled yourself well, he said. Not many people can sit that still while their past burns. Alina smiled faintly. I didn't want revenge, she said. I just wanted the truth to be seen. Whitman nodded. Justice has a way of feeling like revenge to those who have been lying. They parted ways and Alina walked to her car. The old sedan Victor had once mocked. Reliable, paid for, waiting patiently. She sat behind the wheel and let herself feel it. Relief, not joy, not triumph. Freedom, across town, Victor sat in his car with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel. He had nowhere to go. The condo was gone, his job was gone. Lydia had vanished as soon as the illusion cracked. His phone buzzed again. This time an email. Subject, formal notice internal investigation. He didn't open it. He already knew. Back at the apartment, Alina unlocked the door and stepped inside. Silence greeted her, but it was different now. It no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. She walked room to room, reclaiming the space in her mind. No more pretending. No more waiting for late nights and excuses. No more shrinking herself to make someone else feel larger. She made tea again, this time hot, and sat at the same table where Victor had once thrown his keys and promised her ruin. She smiled, not out of spite but closure. Her phone chimed with a message from her sister. How did it go? Alina typed back simply, it's over, I'm okay. She looked around, already planning changes. New curtains, a fresh coat of paint, a space that reflected who she was now, not the woman who stayed silent but the one who listened, calculated, and acted. Outside, Victor sat in his car until night fell. Eventually, he turned the key. The engine coughed to life. It was the only thing he still owned outright for now. As he drove away, headlights cutting through the dark, Victor understood something too late. He hadn't lost Alina because she was weak. He lost her because she was patient. Victor's story was ending, but Alina's was just beginning, and the final chapters would reveal what true freedom really costs. The first night alone felt strange, not lonely, just unfamiliar. Alina lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the city outside her window. No footsteps pacing the apartment. No phone vibrating at midnight. No sudden tension when a door opened too late. Silence, real silence, had a sound of its own. She slept deeply for the first time in months. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the bedroom floor. Alina woke without the familiar weight pressing on her chest. For years, her mornings had begun with anticipation, wondering what mood Victor would be in, what lie she would hear next, what version of herself she would need to perform. Now there was no one to perform for. She made coffee, opened the windows, and let fresh air fill the apartment. It smelled like rain and beginnings. Still, healing wasn't instant. In the following days, memories surfaced unexpectedly. A song in the grocery store, a familiar cologne on a stranger passing by. Each moment tugged gently at the edges of her resolve, but the pain no longer owned her. Victor tried to call. The first time she ignored it. The second time she blocked the number. Then came emails, long, rambling messages swinging between apology and blame. He said he'd been under pressure, that Lydia had manipulated him, that Alina had gone too far. She didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded everything to her lawyer. One afternoon, a knock came at her door. Alina froze. For a split second, old reflexes kicked in. Brace yourself, stay calm, prepare to absorb impact. Then she inhaled and reminded herself, this is your home, you are safe. She opened the door. Victor stood there, unshaven, thinner, his suit replaced by wrinkled clothes that smelled faintly of desperation. Please, he said immediately. Just 5 minutes. Alina didn't step aside. You don't live here, she said calmly. Say what you need to say, he swallowed. I didn't know, he said. About how much you did, about the money. You thought I wouldn't notice, she finished. He nodded miserably. I lost my job, he said. They're auditing everything. I might be in real trouble. Alina felt a flicker of something, sadness perhaps, but it passed quickly. That's not my responsibility. I loved you, he whispered. Alina met his eyes steadily. You loved what I gave you, she replied, not who I was. He reached out instinctively. She stepped back. This conversation is over, she said. He stood there a moment longer, then turned away. Alina closed the door gently and locked it. That night she boxed up the last of Victor's belongings. Old files, forgotten gadgets. A jacket she once loved seeing him wear. She didn't rush, she didn't cry. She labeled the box and scheduled a courier pickup. Closure didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly in small, deliberate acts. A week later, Alina met with Whitman one last time. He handed her finalized paperwork and smiled. You handled yourself with dignity, he said. That matters. As she walked out of his office, Alina realized something important. She no longer felt like a woman recovering from betrayal. She felt like a woman who had reclaimed herself. Alina thought the past was finally behind her, but one last revelation was waiting, and 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Alina Brooks received an envelope that had no return address. It was thick, official-looking. For a moment, she considered setting it aside. Her life had finally settled into a rhythm: work in the mornings, long walks in the evenings, quiet dinners where she listened only to her own thoughts. She had learned that peace could be fragile if mishandled. But something about the envelope felt deliberate. She opened it. Inside was a formal notice from the Financial Crimes Division, along with a short handwritten note clipped to the front. "Ms. Brooks, you are not in trouble. On the contrary, your documentation helped uncover a larger scheme. We may request a brief statement. Thank you for your cooperation." Alina sat down slowly. So it hadn't ended in the courtroom after all. Over the next few days, she learned the full scope of what Victor had been hiding. The internal audit at his former company had expanded into a multi-year investigation. He wasn't just careless, he had been systematic. Several managers were implicated, accounts were frozen, subpoenas issued, and Victor, he had become the example. The man who once bragged about being untouchable now couldn't leave the state without permission. Alina felt no joy in this revelation, only clarity. The truth always surfaces. It doesn't rush, but it never forgets. A week later, she was asked to give a formal statement. The interview was brief and professional. They asked about documents, timelines, and how she had discovered inconsistencies. "You're very thorough," one investigator said, not unkindly. "I'm an accountant," Alina replied simply. When it was over, she stepped outside into the sunlight and realized something important. For the first time, her skills hadn't been minimized or mocked, they had mattered. That evening, Alina stood on her balcony watching the city lights flicker on. She thought about the woman she had been at the start of her marriage: careful, accommodating, convinced that love meant endurance. She smiled softly. Love, she now knew, meant respect. And respect started with herself. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Lydia. I don't know why I'm writing. I just wanted to say. I didn't know everything. He lied to me too." Alina stared at the screen. Then she deleted the message, not out of anger but finality. Some stories didn't need replies. The next morning, Alina made a decision she hadn't planned but felt right. She submitted her resignation from her current bookkeeping job and applied for a senior auditing position she'd once thought was out of reach. 3 days later, she received a call. They wanted to interview her. She hung up. Alina laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh that echoed through the apartment. The condo no longer felt like a place she had defended. It felt like a place she had earned. Alina believed justice was the ending, but it was only the beginning. One final chapter remained, where she would step fully into the life she had rebuilt. The interview room was quiet, sunlit, and calm, nothing like a courtroom. Alina Brooks sat across from two senior partners, her portfolio neatly arranged in front of her. She answered questions without rushing, explaining methodologies, audits she had conducted, discrepancies she had uncovered. She didn't oversell herself, she didn't shrink either. When they asked why she was changing roles, she paused only a moment. "I realized I've spent years fixing problems quietly in the background," she said. "I'm ready to do it openly now." The partners exchanged a look. 2 days later, Alina received the offer. It came with a salary increase, a title she had once assumed was for other people, and most surprisingly, respect. She accepted without hesitation. On her first day, she wore the same navy dress she had worn to court months earlier. This time, there was no tension in her shoulders, no armor in her posture, just confidence. That evening, she returned home as the city lights came on. She kicked off her shoes, opened the windows, and let the breeze move through the rooms. Her rooms. The condo felt different now. Not because the furniture had changed, but because she had. She had stopped waiting for permission to exist fully. Alina poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Below, the city pulsed with lives intersecting, some breaking apart, others just beginning. Somewhere out there, Victor Brooks was dealing with consequences he had once believed were reserved for other people. Court dates. Investigations. Silence from former allies. She didn't think about him often anymore. When she did, it was without bitterness. She understood now that closure wasn't about watching someone suffer, it was about no longer needing to look back. Weeks later, Alina donated Victor's old suits, cleaned, pressed, anonymous. She kept nothing sentimental. Objects only carried meaning if you let them. She painted the living room a soft, warm gray, bought new curtains, rearranged the bookshelves. Small changes that marked a larger truth. The space finally reflected her. One Sunday morning, she visited her grandmother's grave. She brought fresh flowers and stood quietly, hands folded. You were right, Elena said softly. Patience is strength. She felt no sadness, only gratitude. As she walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with a notification. A message from a colleague welcoming her to the new team. Another from her sister, teasing her about celebrating soon. Life was moving forward. That night, Elena sat at her desk and opened a new spreadsheet. Not for evidence, not for defense, but for planning. Goals, travel, investments. Dreams she had once postponed because she was busy surviving. She smiled to herself. For years, she had been told she was quiet, passive, replaceable. They were wrong. She hadn't been silent. She had been listening. She hadn't been weak. She had been precise. And when the moment came, she didn't raise her voice. She balanced the books. Elena closed her laptop, turned off the light, and went to bed. Tomorrow wasn't something she feared anymore. It was something she owned. Some people think revenge is loud, but the most powerful victories are quiet when you walk away whole, free, and finally at peace.